Welcome to Legal Innovation Spotlight, the podcast that brings you the latest advancements in legal tech and knowledge management. I'm Ted Theodoropoulos, and I connect with the industry's brightest minds to provide you with valuable insights and actionable takeaways. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Dan Szabo, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you taking a little bit of time. When I saw your post about winning the Transformative Project of the Year from ILTA, I knew I had to reach out. I saw you speak at the Inside Practice event last spring of 23, and 24. Thought you did a great job. So yeah, man, I'm excited to have you on the podcast.
Oh, me too. I'm actually a longtime listener and reader.
Good.
Ted, thanks for everything you do to keep minds operating at the cutting edge of the industry. I'm really excited to be here and appreciate the invite. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I started the podcast, was never on a bucket list. I started having conversations like the one you and I had the last time we spoke. And I was like, man, you know what? People would listen to this. And it just kind of happened. I did 3 episodes before ILTA 2 years ago and released them. And I was like, man, nobody's going to see this. And 5-7 people came by the booth and goes, hey, a podcast is awesome. I was like, wow, people will listen. So,
yeah. Well, and on that note, they do. And congratulations on your award as well. From ILTA. That was great news. I was very excited to see it. They know quality when they see it, right?
I appreciate it, man. I was shortlisted for that award 10 years prior, and didn't win it, and then reapplied. And I think they would have felt bad if they made me get all dressed up in a suit and go to an awards dinner twice and not win. But I'll take it. Well, let's get you introduced, man. So I was looking at your background. It looks like you studied computer science in college, and you had some app dev gigs prior to stepping into legal. You worked with Littler for a little while, and now you're Senior Director of Innovation at DWT. Fill in the gaps, man. What tell us a little bit about kind of your role and your day-to-day and what, all that sort of stuff.
Sure. Well, I actually got into software development when I was in the Army, across multiple deployments to Iraq. I was really interested in coding and figuring out how apps were being made. Smartphones were starting to show up, and I've always been interested in technology. And so at night between guard duty shifts, I would be studying with a Sam's Teach Yourself book and a flashlight, and on the tiniest laptop I could find, because it needed to fit in my cargo pocket so I could take it with me on guard duty and tours and stuff. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I cut my teeth on it. And then when I got out, I got picked up at Hewlett Packard as a tools developer for consultants and contractors on the ground. So just rapid development, fixing stuff that's broken and building apps for new use cases on the fly. Then a friend of a friend told me this law firm in San Francisco was looking at doing something on this platform called K-Smart. They really wanted to go next level with it, and they were hiring for it. And that is how I got into the industry. It was a high volume platform, kind of a first of its kind. And so they were really navigating this new cutting edge ground as a law firm. And what I didn't know at the time is that it was very unusual for law firms to be developing software themselves, because I was an outsider. I didn't know. And so it was just always normal to me to be doing that. And only after being in the industry for a few years did I realize how unique it was. Well, fast forward to today, DWT wanted to do the same thing. And I was trying to get to the Northwest. And so it was a great match. And here we are. Senior Director of Innovation. We're cranking out apps that are, frankly, really, really good. Our latest hit, DWT.ai, is a large language model that's running inside of the platform, and we're using that as a floor to scaffold new, productivity apps on top of, like Crescendo that you mentioned earlier. And so, yeah, that's how we got here.
And what is that based on? Is that a Llama based implementation?
Sure. So DWT.ai is actually a collection of different technologies working to deliver a ChatGPT-like experience. So it is based on OpenAI, but we do pull in other language models just depending on the kind of prompt that's being asked or the kind of solution that we're trying to deliver based on the use case. And so So yeah, it's an amalgam of different specialties that work in concert to deliver a good experience for our attorneys.
Interesting. So one of the things that struck me about Crescendo, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute, is you guys kind of flipped the script. And before we dive down that rabbit hole, like let's talk for a minute about just the limitations. The current paradigm is, you've got a text box and you type in a prompt and it gives you a response, and you refine, maybe include some documents for RAG purposes, and you eventually work your way to an answer. What are some of the limitations that spurred you to look in other directions with that model?
Sure. So we've been at this about 18 months now. It's been in production for about 18 months, and we've had a lot of opportunity to watch attorneys in the wild using AI, and not just attorneys, but professional staff as well. And they're the technology is great, but the experience has some subtle limitations that I think we were uniquely keen to, because we sort of rushed to the table to figure this out. The first is that um, it's reactive. You actually, when you're working on a document or you're doing something, you have to stop what you're doing, go to a browser tab, paste in your prompt or type it in, whatever, and hit go. And so that's subtly disruptive. But the real insight is that this is, with a large language model, this is actually, it's not a technical exercise, it's a trust exercise, because you're pasting something into a box with an undetermined response. Anything could come back. And so you're just kind of hoping that like a good answer comes back. And there's a trust breach there that creates friction for user adoption, for efficacy of the results. It invites additional scrutiny. And so in some situations, when you use AI, it actually slows the process down because of the additional layers of review it takes when people know AI was used, right? And so that's not something anybody has solved. And the technology will never fully solve it. We'll never get a 100% accurate LLM. So, but one thing that we realized with the tech is that it's good at generating answers, but what it's really good at is answering questions or generating questions for you to answer. What we realized is in this trust exercise, there's two parties. One can hallucinate, the other usually doesn't. One has known good information and the other one doesn't. So we thought, well, this whole reactive experience is actually sort of working against us on tougher use cases. So what if we create a proactive AI? What if the AI prompts you and gets the good information from you and then does something useful with that instead? And that was what unlocked like the next level of like AI interaction, and is the premise for like the Crescendo engine, which is, the proof is in the pudding. Like once we figured that out, it just took off. And so that was the unique insight that sort of set it free.
Interesting. And you see that with some custom GPTs. I think they call them actions. You specify actions, and they're essentially questions. Like, I have one that I use called co-CEO, and I basically put in all of our our core values. I put in our ideal customer profile information. I put in the pitch deck that we delivered at TLTF. I put in our financial deck. We do a monthly financial deck where we have all our information. Mm-hmm. And it is extremely useful. And I use it almost like a board member that I can bounce ideas off of. And it comes with like 4 little simple actions, analyze data, execute tasks, solve problems, build plans. And when you click on one of those actions, it then prompts you for what it needs to conduct some sort of, like analyze data. So was that the inspiration, or did you guys just kind of think of this on your own?
Well, we worked backwards from the problem. We were looking at like, how can we streamline operations and unlock new markets with this? And so we were looking at like our client base and a lot of the population of America that maybe need legal services, but it's just out of reach. And we found that there are like 3 key things that keep vast market segments out of even approaching legal services. And it's time, mobility, and money are just like the 3 things that are completely out of reach for 80% of the population that could use a lawyer, right? And so we thought, well, when a regular person goes to get legal services, a lot of the cost and time is front loaded in just figuring out like, what does this person need? What is their situation? How can I help them as an attorney? Right. And so the use case that we approached, we realized like at first contact, it's 6 hours. It's a 6 hour interview for like, okay, hi, my name is attorney and you are such. Great. Thanks for coming in. What's going on today? And we're going to write all this down and figure it out. And every one of those conversations follows a pattern that is unique to the practice or the situation, right? And we thought, well, what if we could apply some AI there to ask the questions, but not according to a script, or maybe according to a script, but better than following a script like a customer service chatbot. What if it could actually answer a lot of the tertiary questions that come up in that conversation that an attorney could answer for you? Here's a small but simple example to sort of prove my point. If somebody needs to fill out a government form and they've brought it to an attorney to help figure this thing out, like immigration or things like that, one of the questions is, or one of the sections on the form is, please list all children that you have, right? Well, the first question they ask is, including stepchildren? It's not specified anywhere on the form, and the attorney knows in that moment whether it's yes or no, right? So what if we could capture all of that too, and then have the AI conduct a conversation with the person to gather all the information it needs, and then from that unstructured data, pull all of that out and auto-generate the form and send it to wherever it needs to go, right? And for this use case, it took like what was a 6 hour interview where somebody had to drive down to see an attorney, to take time out of their day. Oftentimes as people are working, so they're taking time off of work. Usually I have a friend because maybe English isn't their first language, so maybe we need the AI to speak a different language or to be able to parse like broken English at worst. And I don't know, what do you say we make it free, because this stuff is getting cheaper and cheaper every day, right? And so it took that 6 hour interview and it took it down to 1 hour. And people that are using the system are able to use it on any device in any language they want at any time of day. And if they want, they can use voice, right? Because a lot of these things take a long time to type out. They can do it on their phone, their iPad, whatever, right? And so that was how it all came about. We just worked backwards from like, who needs a product the most? And if we do this for them, so too could we do this for the industry. And so that was how it came about. That was the inspiration for it. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So like this is matter. It's a matter intake tool, right?
In that situation, that's right. But really it could be for anything that follows a general script, right? Doesn't just have to be matter intake. So too could it be for screening of applications for anything, that kind of thing. The application for this technology is vast, right? But so you're right. In this situation, it is matter intake, but we see opportunity for it everywhere. I mean, can you imagine how many forms of the DMV could be turned into a chatbot conversation, right?
No doubt.
And so that's sort of what we're eyeballing. Yeah. That's the potential use for this.
Yeah, I was just there the other day, and it's incredible the number of times that you have to go back because you don't have the right documents. Like one time in particular, just recently, I had they were requiring like 2 years in Missouri. The systems don't talk to each other, so the tax system doesn't talk to the DMV system. So you have to print out a piece of paper from the tax office that says no taxes due. They call it a no tax due certificate. Well, they wanted 2 years of no tax due. I only had 1 year. The truck was only 1 year old. So I'm literally driving back and forth between the tax office and the DMV. And what an incredible waste of time. And it was a frustrating situation. So, had something like this existed, it would have greased the skids tremendously.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at best, with the current systems today, it's a website with a deep hierarchy that you're just poking around looking for the answer. Like how many years, if you even think to ask how many years of tax documents, right? Whereas the AI can proactively assert that, right? And generate a checklist for you because it knows all about the process and things like that. Yeah. So it saves everybody time and increases productivity. There's just like no downside, right? To doing this kind of thing. Yeah.
So I see huge applications in the A to J world. Like, is that in scope here, or are you using this mainly with kind of corporate clients?
No, we're not ruling anything out at this point. So far in our market research, like there's just demand or unmet needs like everywhere, where if we, we position this properly, like there's just unlimited upside. And so that's the hope for the engine that's driving all of this. Yeah.
So in that particular scenario, you had a 600% increase in efficiency. Is that uniform across the board? Are you seeing higher, lower efficiency gains in other areas where you've applied this tech, or is that staying pretty consistent?
Well, it's consistent. Uh, it depends on the length of, like, for example, the complexity of the intake for that moment. But there's sort of a second order effect here that's hard to quantify, but is profound. It's hard to measure. When you generate like the form or whatever, and it gets set, or excuse me, when you construct the form from the conversation, right, and you send it on to wherever it's going, it can arrive at that inbox with additional analytics. Um, for immigration, for example, a lot of those answers are open ended. Why are you immigrating? You know, that kind of thing, right? Then so, the AI has coached people through like pulling out the best version of themselves to put in this document. But when it arrives to attorney, it can also arrive with like, this answer is really good, but it looks a little soft here. Oh, this part contradicts what they set up here. You might double down on that when you do finally meet with them, right? And the net effect of that is when they do meet client for the first time, it's not a cold start with like, oh, what's your name, right? No, they're hitting the starting line at 100 miles an hour, right? And in our experience, the feedback that we've gotten is the fidelity of the initial conversation is just so much richer than it otherwise would have been, that they're achieving just like velocity and cruise and like cruising speed way earlier in the engagement with this client. And so, the systems don't exist to measure that kind of like thing yet, but we can, it's tangible. And, if we could measure it in vibes and feedback and enthusiasm, like that we've received back for that kind of thing, it's blowing away expectations, exceedingly so. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the upside.
Vibe intake. That's what you're doing, is
Oh, I
right.
like it. Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
I've seen like vibe lawyering. Obviously vibe coding. That's the new hot word is vibe. What about, so this required R&D, and that's one of the, I've really been beating this drum with legal clients, is to think about, R&D is a foreign concept to law firms. On average, they spend 1% of operating costs on R&D. The average company, right? This includes, across the board, across industries, is 4%. So they spend 1/4, and that's due to a number of different things. I think one of the big drivers is the fact that law firms use cash basis accounting, which is actually a small business accounting approach. IRS has rules where if you're more than 25 million in revenue, you have to use accrual based accounting, and then R&D makes sense, right? You have a mechanism to amortize expense over multiple years, but it's completely foreign to law firms, and they're going to have to shift. I'm not saying they're going to have to, switch to accrual accounting, but they're going to have to shift their mindset to a place where, instead of thinking about ROI, I need ROI. I hear that from a lot of law firm leaders when they talk about AI investment. And it's like, your return on investment, your return sometimes is learning, or it's the accumulation of intellectual property that allows you to enable capabilities like the ones you guys built. How did your firm wrap their head around conceptualizing R&D and ultimately getting partners, some of which are, 2 years from retirement, and they're not going to see the break even on this until maybe further down the road? How did you build support and change the mindset around that?
Sure. Well, it starts with the right leadership. Our C-suite is pretty forward thinking and I'd say tech interested, if not enthusiastic. Also, that is a trust exercise as well. We had to start small and generate small wins, such that the firm had the confidence that like dollars they invested into our program were well spent. And so that's where it started. But I take your point. I like what you're saying about like this. Actually, R&D is sort of antithetical to the existing model, right? Like it doesn't doesn't really make sense to try to disrupt something that's going so well. But this last generation of technology has really introduced, in my opinion, some existential threats, if not important conversations that need to be had about this. And I think it's because, like, historically, if you look at like the arc of technology innovation, the innovations and the disruption rarely come from within any company. It's more so that the incumbents, the existing big players, usually they don't enjoy it so much as they get T-boned by it at the intersection of like innovation, technology, and like market forces, right? So if we take streaming, for example, like, Blockbuster was never going to invest in a Netflix disruptor, right? Because their existing business was doing just fine, right? There was no interest in like messing with a great thing. CNN was never going to invent YouTube any more than cable was going to invent like streaming, right? Like, and so too do our leaders think that will be the case for this new and burgeoning technology. Law firms are not inherently gauged for this kind of activity. You have to make a conscious effort and really push on it. And it's not a mayfly project either. Like, this is an initiative, and if anything, a huge culture shift has to take place here. Now, to answer your question about how we do that, the answer is by starting small and with the leadership in the firm and showing them, like, this is what we're doing. This is how it's useful. We're not going to push this into your practice group without your say so, like all of that stuff, right? We need everybody to go in eyes wide open about, the upside to this, but also like the risks that you adopt inherently when you bring something like this into your practice, right? And so that was how GWT was able to make it happen. And to date, over 50% of the firm uses the app every day now.
Wow.
And that's a lot of people, right? But that didn't happen overnight, to your point, right? That was a slow burn. But yeah, and so that's how we did it.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a LinkedIn post recently where I mapped out. So, my position is that AI, it is an extinction level event for the traditional law firm model, and product market fit for the traditional model is crumbling beneath our feet. And we've got headwinds in the legal industry that are holding us back from being the Netflix of the world. And the reasons, the sources of those headwinds I mapped out: consensus driven decision making slows rates of change; lateral mobility, so the fact that law firm even partners can take their book of business and move down the street also creates challenges. Why am I going to write checks and invest in a capital project when I might be down the street in 3 years? Healthy profit margins make the status quo sticky. Cash basis accounting and retirement horizons, which we talked about. Law schools aren't keeping pace. Only around half even offer AI courses. Half, which blows my mind. Like, that number should be in the 90s. Empowering non-lawyer managers, the business professionals, that's a tough sell. It doesn't always happen. Risk aversion. Lawyers are naturally risk avoidant, and R&D requires risk. And then finally, and I think this is a big one, it's lack of diversity within law firm leadership. If you look at law firm leadership, it's a bunch of old white dudes primarily, right? I looked at something like 50% of, I found this stat somewhere on the internet, 50% of executive committee membership is male 55 and older, right? The people who really understand this technology best, and there's data on this from McKinsey, it's millennials, right? They need to have a seat at the leadership table, not just your director of innovation who's 4 levels down from the XCOM. They need to have a seat at the table where conversations are had about capital deployment. And it's not happening for the most part today. So I don't know, man. It feels like the firms that manage these headwinds most effectively are going to be the long-term winners. You agree?
Oh yeah, it's coming. Part of the problem, Ted, is that, for all of the progress that's been made, this tech has only really been mainstream for the last 2 years. Before that, you didn't want to be the guy in the room that was like, no, believe me, computers will talk to you one day. Like it was still a weird thing, right? But you're right. Those of us that are in it can see clearly what is happening, especially given the history of technology and the way it disrupts industries. It takes, it gives, but it takes. I love the points in your blog post, by the way. I want to back up to like models changing. Part of the problem with like us saying that models change or like business models need to change is the data doesn't support it yet, but we
Right.
can clearly see it, right? Because the industry is growing, legal service spend is growing as our clients are as they start to adopt this new technology. That said, there's something is happening with the tech that I think is going to catch everybody by surprise. Where it is most suited today is with like large, high volume matters that are pretty consistent in the way these things are handled, right? Now, the technology is doing great to improve the quality and streamline those services. It's increasing in efficacy, but the barriers to entry and adoption are also decreasing, such that you don't actually need an expert lawyer to string together some of these systems. And all you really need is a really motivated like BA, business analyst, with some guidance from a supercharged paralegal or an associate partner, and they can get really effective with this stuff really fast. And whether that happens at a law firm or in-house, there's no like moat saying like that knowledge has to be locked up anywhere. So that's going to be a thing. Make of that what you will, but like that is going to be a thing all law firms will have to navigate, is the increasing efficacy and power of the technology as it operates in-house, right? That's going to be a thing. I also love what you said about lateral movement. Who would have thought 10 years ago that one of the first questions any lateral asks when they're eyeing a new firm is like, well, what's your technology stack like? Right? Like that's a new thing. Who's your CIO? Like that's
Yeah.
where does your firm managing partner stand on like technology adoption, right? And it doesn't stop there. You can see a future in which like M&A, these are tough questions that are getting asked up front, right? Like, when you're looking to bring in 80 attorneys and their tech stack and stuff. So the question will ask, like, do you guys have any, or they will ask the question, where are you with AI? Do you have AI systems? Who are your AI vendors, right? Like it bears mentioning that will be a first-class citizen concern in all M&A, and not just for law firms, but all industries going forward, right? But I think the thing that you said, about the incoming generation is it's poignant, and it is front and center for me lately. It's on my mind because I had the good fortune of going to a Stanford Codex hackathon a few weeks ago. Codex is a program at Stanford University that it sits between the computer science program and the law school, right? And it's sort of right now it's acting as a conduit between the two to introduce both to each other with AI. And it's exceptional. If you get a chance, your listeners might be interested in learning more about it. Look up Megan Ma at Stanford. She's a spectacular leader. She's built this program up to be so good. But we got to go down to their hackathon. And Ted, I'm getting goosebumps as I even think about it. You would not believe the things that I saw in the 12-hour hackathon as we got to mentor and coach these kids. I'm going to give you, if it's okay, I'd love to give you just two examples of the apps that I saw built. But the big thing is about the way these kids did it, which I think is going to be most interesting to law firms. In 12 hours, with the power of AI, random teams that were assigned, kids that had never met before, sometimes they had a coder, sometimes they didn't, churned out, they had 12 hours to churn out an AI-powered app. And some of these things were amazing. The first one was called Claim Hero. What Claim Hero does is it uses AI to help regular people like you and me appeal denied medical claims. Like it's amazing. And it was really good. Like it wasn't like, oh, this is a prototype we cobbled together. Here's mockups. No, like it was a full-blown prototype. These kids were using AI-assisted development tools. They were practically talking to a computer, and it was building the app that they were inspired to build, right? Excuse me. The next one, the one that won, was called GovMatch. And what this app does, this is a team of MBAs and an engineer. They realize that when you're a small business and you're working on gigs like government contracts or whatever, like it's really hard to service a contract and find the new one at the same time. What you end up with is like this lurching business model where you're working a gig and you finish it, and now you've got to find the next gig. You're not making money. Then you find it and you start making money again, and then you finish that gig and you stop making money while you find the next one. Well, what they did was they built an agent that is just always looking for the next gig and pitching you and filling out the RFPs and submitting your thing and then plugging it in to where it made sense on your calendar. Ted, and it was really good. Like, this wasn't like janky stuff that kids were putting together. Like, and so my takeaway there is great software is table stakes now. With AI enabled development teams, anybody can build anything and in record time. Now, was it production ready? Of course not. It was a product, but it wasn't a company yet. There's a lot more that goes into it. But my point is, like, this tech is enabling people to create as quickly as they can think. And that's amazing. But how does this relate to law firms in the incoming generation of people? Ted, we're not ready for it. No one in our generation is. When I was watching, so there was an auditorium and a lot of tables with like engineering teams and kids sitting around doing their thing. But what I saw is, these kids are amazing collaborators. They grew up in an era of co-authoring. None of them have used Word solo mode like us. Their entire being has just been co-authoring everything, right? They've a totally connected world, multiplayer only, right? They just collaborate so well with groups of strangers coming together and just being able to mix and match ideas and thoughts and put pen to paper or fingers to keys or voice to AI or whatever the mechanism is, like, they can do it well at scale. But the other thing that was interesting is I would watch a team release a really cool feature, right? And they'd post it to Insta or whatever the social media platform of choice is. And I would watch all the phones light up across the auditorium. And it was like a beehive kicking into gear. Oh, did you see what they've got? We've got to add that to ourselves. And table by table, as the ideas spread, the whole thing came alive. And so, like, the rate of information distribution and assimilation is so much faster than a corporate memo to us would ever matriculate across like a large population of people. It was a hive mind, like, operating at a higher level than like we've ever experienced. And I don't know what that means, but I sense that's profound, and that's going to mean some different things for the industry as these creative like minds come into play, right? There's no way any hiring recruiter is going to make any sense at all to these kids in an interview when they start asking questions about, like, what is team collaboration like? And we're like, well, we schedule meetings, you know what I mean? And we circulate a link to a document, right? And that is going to look just slow. That's just going to look slow to them. Yeah. So who knows what that means, but it means something. And we're going to be here to see it firsthand. Yeah. That was a soapbox, but you get what I mean, right?
No, that's good stuff, man, and that's a really good point. I had another post. I'm plugging my LinkedIn post here, but I think it's super relevant to what you just talked about. So Dr. Larry Richard wrote a book called Lawyer Brain, and he has conducted like 35 years of research. He surveyed over 30,000 attorneys, and he has a list of traits in which attorneys score either much higher or much lower than the general population. So high in skepticism, high in autonomy, high in urgency, high in abstract reasoning. Few of these are assets to innovation: urgency, abstract reasoning, low sociability, low resilience, low empathy. Those are inhibitors to innovation. So I heard a podcast with Andrew Huberman and Mark Andreessen, and Mark Andreessen mapped out the 5 traits of an innovator. And who knows more about innovation than Mark Andreessen? I mean, that dude invented the web browser, literally, and then has spent the last 30 plus years as a VC in Silicon Valley. He writes checks based on his assessment of a founder's ability to exhibit these traits. Those traits are open to many new kinds of ideas, not lawyers. High level of conscientiousness, that's lawyers. High in disagreeableness, that's definitely lawyers. High IQ, they're definitely smart people. High in resilience, that's not lawyers. So we've got a gap, and it's not. I'm not saying like lawyers can't be innovative, but if you look at the bell curve, the ones that tend to be outliers. They're really past focus. Like, practicing the law requires the concept of precedent, right? And it's a backward looking practice or discipline. Risk orientation, lawyers are risk averse. Outlook, innovators are very optimistic. Lawyers are skeptic. Comfort with ambiguity, innovators extremely high, lawyers low. Resilience to setbacks, relationship to status quo. There's all these different markers. So it's not that, hey, blow up your innovation committee and put a bunch of millennials on there. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is the lawyer perspective is necessary but not sufficient for innovation in law firms. And they need to augment, they need to bring in business professionals, younger ones who really grasp this technology, those digital natives that have that beehive mindset, and bring a different dimension to the conversation. Because if we just have a innovation council or committee of only lawyers, it's not, it's probably, we're missing opportunities. So I think there's real lessons to be learned in what you experienced. And I don't know how we communicate that like without seeing it firsthand like you did, but there are lessons there.
Yeah, I agree. I think gosh, I get so excited to think about it, because if channeled correctly, it could be a superpower for any firm that has to evolve their platform and their offering faster and faster. What you can't do is assemble a board of people that sit around just thinking big thoughts and then like inventing things and then going to market and hoping there's a problem that it solves. Right. I think that the problems will be appearing so quickly that you're going to need a culture that can evolve and adapt on the fly and generate new product offerings and new ways of thinking about services faster and faster, because the needs of our clients will be evolving in step with how quickly their core technology offerings are as well. You can imagine, any large technology company, how different their needs are today than they were a year ago, because they can move faster and get into new territory and new lines of business faster than ever before, right? And so it might be that your law firm just doesn't have services available for like the new ground that they're covering, right? But it could, if you have a team of people that can assemble these things and think differently about the offerings or even the new business models that they grew up with. Like, for example, kids today, man, even saying kids today, I realize like where I'm at in my career as well. I remember being that kid with crazy ideas and no one would listen to, right? It's like, no, you don't understand. I see it every day. You guys have been locked up in this big building, like heads down, doing great work, but things are changing out there and it's coming, right? Um, they've grown up in a world with completely different billing models where everything is just a monthly service charge, right? For all you can eat or at some kind of thing, right? And so maybe like they bring in the ability to see ways of bundling legal services where maybe the AFAs are commoditized and done cheaply, but at a higher rate for litigation services, and mixing and matching these things to best meet the situation that clients are now navigating, right? Like, I think we're going to need that kind of thing, and it's not going to happen by default. I do think this is going to be a conscious decision that leaders make to create environments where that kind of culture can thrive and good ideas can come out of. Because if you don't, it's someone else will. Maybe it won't be a law firm, but it will happen to the incumbents one way or another. I just want to point out, we've had for the last 30 years, like it's been the same 30 tech companies that sort of rolled the roost, right? But they were not the big tech companies 30 years ago. There was a time when today's companies were small startups looking at a way to disrupt existing industries. Ted, 30 years ago, who were the incumbents, the gigantic companies that nobody thought could ever tumble, right? The major phone companies, big networking companies, right? Big faceless, the IBMs, everything, right? And who would have thought that they could ever be disrupted? And they didn't. The internet came along and they didn't disrupt themselves, right? They used it as a tool to enhance their service offerings, but it wasn't until this generation of natives that like the Googles, the Yahoos, those early adopters, like the Amazons, got out that the Facebooks, the MySpaces, used this technology and they realized like those incumbents were not the ceiling, right? That was actually the floor that they could build all these new cool services on. And wouldn't you know it, disrupt them at the same time, right? Missed opportunities left and right as this new technology and these new types of companies and ideas started to form that could solve problems and for clients that the big guys were just too big to be nimble enough to maneuver around and add service offerings for, right? That is the period that we are approaching with this new technology. Like the incumbents are the ceiling, but that's not where this technology is just going to smash right through it, and you're going to see new types of like things being built. If I had to guess, if I had to forecast like what happens over the next period of time, like with this tech, I legitimately believe the top 10 firms of the 2030s are being determined right now because these things are happening at hackathons and in garages. ALSPs are popping up that are AI first, right? And maybe it's not as good as like a large law firm, but their technology is good enough and it's way cheaper. So like maybe that's enough to get by. And so you know, if you just sort of look a little bit into the future, you can see where you know, people do some really interesting stuff and invent new markets with it, right? Or new ways to interact with customers. Like it's all within reach now. And the crazy thing is just like in the 90s, look at what they did with super slow internet. You know what I mean? 2 kilobits per second. I mean, and that's where we are with this tech. Like our language models in 10 years that we have today are going to look downright primitive because this technology is only getting faster. There's nothing to indicate it's going to slow down in efficacy or ability, right? And so I think the real question is who's nimble enough? Which of the three firms will you be in the future? Will you be a new one? Will you be one that's merging with a new one? Or will you be a boutique or purpose built like technology firm that offers like some kind of like digital service, right? Because it's going to be the floor is raising for like what will be acceptable. I think that's what we're looking at over the next 10, 10, 15 years. The next chapter of law looks just like that.
Yeah, and if you are in that M&A scenario where you're merging and you're not the technical leader, you're not adept, your multiple on your business is going to be miserable, right? You're going to be getting sold at a fire sale price because really, what do you have? You have people, and it's not that people are going away. I actually, there's a lot of Chicken Little out there in the
Yeah.
marketplace, like, oh, the sky's falling. I don't think that at all. I think the sky's falling if you don't take action. I think there are opportunities. There's going to be a reshuffling of the deck in the AM law. And I've used this comparison many times. If you look at the big four, which they're also a partnership model and they have their own issues, but the combined revenue of the big four is 220 billion. The combined revenue of the AM law 100 is like 140 billion, right? It's extremely fragmented, and there's going to be consolidation as we move into this tech-enabled legal services era, right? Because it's no longer bespoke. Legal work is moving from bespoke nature to the assembly line. And there's still going to be bespoke work. There's always going to be. There are special, unique needs
Oh yeah.
associated. But man, there is a lot that can absolutely make its way to the production line. And if you're just a production line worker, if you're a craftsman, and what sort of value are you going to bring to the firm that's acquiring you that has this tech-enabled legal machine that they invested in? Probably not a lot of value there.
Yeah, I think, man, I'm on board. I think it hollows out the middle. Like technology has a habit, like when it explodes into an industry, it has a habit of like bifurcating industries. And what you end up with is a couple winners at the very top, and then everybody else just fighting for like boutique status just to get noticed, right? What is your thing that makes you different? I mean, if we look at the internet today, I mean, Netflix is streaming, Facebook is social, LinkedIn is professional, uh, Amazon is shopping, right? There are like 20 websites tops that actually matter, you know what I mean, in terms of like the economy and scale and things like that. And so if we play that out, like in the industry, you're right. The real question is like, how do you get big and achieve scale? Like, how can you leverage a first mover's advantage? Because that's what they all have in common. The big ones that we have today, those top 30 firms that we talked about earlier, they got in there fast. It wasn't enough to just be first. That's like the saving grace. Like you can be first and still get it wrong. There are a lot of first mice out there. Right?
MySpace is a great example.
MySpace is a great example, right? But whoever shows up in that early pack, maybe second, that can demonstrate good enough efficiency with the technology, right? Build a dedicated workforce that understands their customers. But third, create that moat that that helps you achieve scale that's almost impossible to penetrate. Facebook's like button, Amazon's affiliate program, right? There are these things that incumbents can do to sort of solidify like the next quarter century of like business for themselves. And in my opinion, I think the situation will be the same for any industry that the technology sort of crashes through the wall into. So that's, I think, but to that point, to your point earlier about R&D and like how does this all tie together? Well, you don't want to be as a law firm as a forced buyer of technology. What you don't want to do is wake up and realize the market has caught up to you and it's time to change. Blockbuster realized that all too late, right? What you can't start doing, this is a tough sell in any partnership, is at the same time the revenues are going down because you're being chipped away, someone's going to show up and say, we should invest in R&D at the same time and start eating away at the bottom line from another angle. That's a bad situation. That looks more like desperation than innovation, right? And so you've got to hedge your bets and you've got to be ready for it. If not actively doing it, then planning for like what is the maneuver that your firm will pull off to stay at the cutting edge and ahead of the pack, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and we see. I already see early signs. It is very early, so it by no way can you pick out winners and losers here. But you're starting to see some early indicators. Firms who I talked to, a good friend of mine who's a director at innovation, about a 400 attorney law firm, and I asked her what the strategy is with AI. And she said, well, we're piloting 20 co-pilot licenses. And I was like, what else? We'll call her Sarah for this. What else are you doing, Sarah? Well, the it's a conservative board and they really want to focus on ROI. And I'm looking at that picture, and then I'm looking at what you guys are doing, what Cleary's doing. There's early signs with, like, you look at Cooley and the team that they're assembling at Cooley. I'm seeing, again, these are early signs. It doesn't mean that everybody who is making these early moves is going to be the ultimate winners, but you're already starting to see this parting of the seas. And man, unless there's some pretty dramatic course correction, once momentum heads you in a direction, it's really hard, just like you said, to pivot, because again, while times are good, you need to be investing while you have, the margin to do it. Because once things start heading south, it's, the scarcity kicks in, and then it's a race to the exits. So it's been really cool to see what you guys are doing there. I've actually known your firm for a long time. Lawton Penn, who she was probably there before. Do you know her?
Yeah, I caught the tail end of her stay at DWT.
Oh, okay. Yeah, she's great. I met her 10 years ago at a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt conference. Not Black Belt, but it was a Six Sigma event in legal that ARC put on. So yeah, like that was another early sign. Like, honestly, based on the fact of their presence at that event, I would have said, you know what, these guys are thinking ahead, because there's not a lot of, I'm a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, and I pay attention when I see firms adopting methodologies like that. You don't see it a lot. It does exist, but it's pretty rare. Again, outliers, long tail. So it's cool to see what you guys are doing. I know we're running out of time here, but man, this has been a fun conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ted. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
The work you're doing in the community to elevate the consciousness, about all of this stuff and where it's all headed. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, our livelihood is tied exclusively to law firms. Like, we have 100% law firm client. So like, I really want a lot of people, I've gotten feedback before, like, man, you're really negative on the industry. Like, no, I'm not negative at all. I love this industry. I've been here almost 20 years. I love it. I want to stay in it. I'm trying to raise the red flag. Like, guys, we got to start thinking differently. So it's good to see, firms like DWT do it and then get recognized. So congratulations on the award. That's a big one, man. We've had 2 clients win that award for intranets that we've built for them, and we had a front row seat to the process. It is highly competitive. So kudos for winning that recognition.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and I appreciate it, but like I tell everybody, I'm just a paint job on a team that's doing great work. The engine that drives this innovation, our leaders, our engineers, our attorneys. One thing, if I could, since we're talking about DWT, one of the cool things about the Crescendo engine is that it wasn't built in a bubble. For the first time in DWT history, maybe the legal industry, this internal innovation, they put this up for the entire firm to test before we went live with it. We had over 75 attorneys, counsels, paralegals, professional staff show up and commit hours to testing this thing because it's a zero fault, zero tolerance environment. Like, we can't even risk a single mistake, the system making a single mistake. And so the firm got behind this, not to put too fine a point on it, but that's a demonstration of culture I have never seen anywhere, right? Like a commitment to innovation and excellence. And so to that, I much gratitude to the firm to make sure that this thing was as bulletproof as possible before we put it into production. And so just one of the reasons I love working here, because like I said, the leadership is a huge part of making all of this happen. Yep.
I think it was Jack Welch that used to talk, former CEO of GE, used to talk about the tone at the top, right? The tone at the top dictates the culture, man. You got to have that leadership buy-in. So, and another metaphor is, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? It doesn't matter how good your strategy is if your culture doesn't support it. So it's good to hear that you guys are doing it right. Well, cool, man. It was great talking to you. Good conversation as always. Look forward to seeing you at a conference and finding other ways to collaborate to get the word out.
Yeah, me too. Thanks a lot, Ted. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. All right, take care. Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content.